Getting old sucks, and every other day there's a new hyped up diet or supplement that promises insane health benefits and even ways to slow down aging and live longer. The truth is though, there's a lack of proof they can actually do that. But even though it might sound crazy, there may be a way to literally cure aging, and it's thanks to something that already lives inside all of us. Let's explore that. So here's the thing. Traditionally, aging is viewed as a natural and inevitable process, something that happens no matter what and can't be stopped. But if we tweak how we look at aging and instead see it as an underlying cause of symptoms, it is a totally different story.
I characterise aging as the biggest humanitarian challenge of our time. When you unpack the biology, the whole range of different biological changes that happen as we age make us much more likely to get a whole range of different diseases. Things like cancer, heart disease, Alzheimer's, basically the biggest killers in the modern world.
This is Dr. Andrew Steele, a computational biologist who wrote a book on aging and explored scientific breakthroughs that prove that aging may not be a biological inevitability after all. And this framing suggests that aging is something that could be influenced and even cured.
Because if you look around the animal kingdom, aging isn't a universal phenomenon. For example, humans have a risk of death that doubles every 8 years. But there are some animals, things like giant tortoises, salamanders, some kinds of fish, and they have a risk of death that doesn't change with time. They can get old without getting elderly.
So the question is, could humans do something like this? Get older without getting elderly? Well, some people think, yeah, why not? And one of the most promising areas of research on how we might be able to do it is by hacking our stomachs, or at least the trillions of microorganisms that make up what we call the gut microbiome. Your microbiome is something that you're born with. It's made up of trillions of microorganisms of thousands of different species.
Bacteria, fungi, parasites, viruses, all of the microorganisms that consist of an ecosystem, and they live all over the surfaces of our body.
Your microbiome is unique to you, kind of like a fingerprint, and it starts when you're just a little baby and changes over time as you're exposed to new people, environments, and diets. The largest numbers of these microbes live in the small and the large intestines, and they play major roles in our body's functions. There are harmful microbes in there, but when it comes to the good microbes, we actually really need them.
The microbiome is even called a supporting organ because it plays such a key role in supporting human health.
They stimulate our immune systems, protect us from diseases, they help us digest food, and so much more.
The gut microbiome is also able to break down toxic food compounds, and they're also able to synthesize vitamins. And so in general, the gut microbiome works with us and works with so many different elements to support human health and keep us healthy and keep us happy.
Which is great, but what gets me excited is how gut microbiome research is blowing up right now and how it's revolutionizing the way that we think about our bodies.
So disturbances to the microbiome have been connected to diseases like autism, anxiety, obesity, autoimmune conditions, and even cancer. There are some diseases where it's very clear that the microbiome itself might be contributing to inflammation or causing the disease itself. The key to a healthy microbiome is actually increased diversity. The more diversity you can see in terms of the types of microbes that are in your microbiome, the healthier that person tends to be.
And this is where the implications for aging and longevity come in.
Changes to our microbiome are one of the hallmarks of the aging process. Older people's gut microbiome tends to be less diverse than the microbiome of healthy younger people. We also know that by intervening in the microbiome, you can either slow down the aging process by improving that microbiome, or you can accelerate it by accelerating the decline in the microbiome, which causes a change in the aging of the whole body. And that's because we've discovered that there's a huge connection between the microbes in your gut and the health of the rest of your body. And it really seems like our bodies and our microbiome are acting in tandem to try and keep us healthy as we get older.
And what this means is there are probably situations where the quickest disease treatment is the one that deals directly with the microbiome and just lets beneficial bacteria help out the rest of the body. So we know that different people have really different gut microbiomes, so it makes sense that looking at the microbiomes of people who are already living long and happy lives is a pretty solid place to start figuring out what works. And scientists at the Keio University of Medicine in Tokyo did just that. They gathered a group of older people, and I mean like really old. They were all over 100 years old with an average age of 107. And they weren't just living a long life, they were insanely healthy. They seemed to be miraculously protected somehow from diabetes, high blood pressure, obesity, and even cancer. And it was found that these people all had similar strains of bacteria in their guts, with one strain in particular really standing out. It's a type of bacteria that synthesized a chemical that could knock out infections that cause things like severe diarrhea and sometimes even death. Like tiny bodyguards in these people's guts, they had bacteria that were producing a bile acid similar to what would be produced naturally by their own livers. And all of this is really interesting, seeing as it means that this type of gut microbiome could protect people from infections, pathogens, and environmental risks. Now, this is just one example of unique microbiomes that are linked to living longer. But the obvious next thought from any experiment like this is if there's a way that we could basically bottle it up and give it to people. Or, in other words, how can we apply this to treating aging? And after doing a little bit of research, I found out that there's basically three main routes to answer that question. First, we could tweak our microbiome with specific foods or supplements like yogurt and fermented foods that are called probiotics. They work by introducing some of those good microorganisms into your guts when you eat them.
I think these are going to be a very promising treatment in future when we understand a bit more about the microbiome. But at the moment, the evidence for the existing products you can buy in the supermarket, well, it's a bit difficult to say because we don't know exactly which species of bacteria are most beneficial, and there's also the far more practical problem. In order to get from your mouth to your intestine, these bacteria need to go through your stomach, which is a nasty acidic environment, and we just don't really know how many of the bacteria actually make it through to your intestine.
There's also research being done on prebiotics, which are substances that don't really have nutritional value for us, but they feed the good bacteria in the gut to keep them doing what they do best. And then these pre- and probiotics can also be combined into what's called symbiotics. But the next option is a little more direct. Remember when I said it would be great to bottle up the microbes in those super healthy old people's guts? Well, the term bottling it up might have been a little bit of an overly nice way of putting it.
If we want to try and intervene in the microbiome to improve all of our aging processes, it really does seem like we've got some optimistic ideas. And one of them is something called a microbiome transplant. Unfortunately, this is about as gross as it sounds. It's often done by a process called fecal transplantation, so basically a poo transplant, where you might swallow a capsule containing some freeze-dried components of somebody else's poo. But the idea is that person would be young, they'd be healthy. Those microbes inside that capsule would then replenish your microbiome and make it biologically younger.
Nice. But if that doesn't sound great, then the third option is kind of a middle ground, where instead of introducing actual microbes, we could just figure out what specific byproducts they create that have the positive impacts on human longevity, and then just specifically use them.
So what we could do would be to effectively cut out the middle microbe, and rather than giving you beneficial bacteria or trying to cultivate a more diverse microbiome directly, we could just give you that bacterial byproduct. We could synthesize it in the lab and use those things as drugs.
But really, all of these options are either pretty extreme or really early in the experimental or hypothetical phase. So if you're sitting there thinking, okay, well, what can I do right now? The best answer might be the most simple answer. You could keep your microbiome in good shape just by eating well. I know, that's a super hot take.
There's an awful lot of chat about, things like low carb diets or fasting or perhaps calorie restriction, which is the idea of just eating less all of the time. But the fact is, it's just going to take an awfully long time for us to break apart the huge complexity of human diet.
Okay, so this is all really interesting, but if we're talking about longevity, there is a lot more than just gut health that's being looked into. And longevity as a whole has seen a massive spike in interest since billionaires like Jeff Bezos, Larry Page, and Peter Thiel started investing heavily in longevity companies. There are just so many factors at play. It's like a massive puzzle with thousands of pieces, and the gut microbiome is just one of them.
When I talk about curing aging, I'm not thinking about a single pill that's suddenly going to mean we all live forever. It's actually going to mean tackling a whole range of what are called hallmarks of the aging process. And I think if we wanted to cure aging, we'd have to come up with treatments for many, perhaps even all of these things, and use them to slow down the decline as we get older.
So while I can't give you the fountain of youth just yet, I will say that this microbiome research is exploding, and it's something that experts are getting increasingly stoked about. Well, that and the longevity escape velocity, which is a hypothetical situation where life expectancy extends longer than the time that is passing, which could lead to an infinite life cheat code, but that's probably something that's best explored in a whole other episode.